Hello. I thought it'd be fun to talk about spiritual awakening in other contexts. For example, the awakenings, the true spiritual awakenings of Christians, several great Christians. They didn't know yoga, but they experienced the same process that yogis enjoy. The spiritual awakening, the rising, the ascent, and the descent. So, doesn't this sound like fun? Let's do it. Not only yogis have awakenings and enlightenment and liberation. Sufis, Zen aspirants, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, agnostics even if they're sincere, and Christians, of course, also have spiritual awakenings that yogis recognize and appreciate. I was being told I was called to be a Christian minister, and I was ready, but I didn't have a feeling that God existed or that God wanted me to be a minister. And I said, I'll be very happy to be a minister if God will reveal that God exists and that God wants me to be a minister. Yes, I'll be happy to sign up. But it took yoga to help me have a spiritual breakthrough, as is true of so many people. When they learn how to meditate and they learn some basic yoga, then they have breakthroughs on their own religious paths. So many people around the world who are devout and wonderful illustrations or manifestations of their religion have been helped by yoga to have that breakthrough. It happened to me. I'm very grateful. Intense prayer, prolonged prayer didn't work. I used to have a key to a church and pray all night for a couple of years. Not every night. Often find myself waking up at the altar, lying there as the sun came in through the windows. But I so wanted to have a spiritual breakthrough, and I couldn't break through somehow. And I had lots of people praying for me. Wonderful people. People who knew and had spiritual breakthroughs. People who did know Spirit and did have faith. I was trying to have faith, but I didn't have any experience to build on. Anyway, that's just an example. That's a side point. We often need to have a spiritual experience to walk our own spiritual path. And yoga is happy to help. And yoga helped me so much. But we take various great people through history. Teresa of Avila, my goodness, what a wondrous person. She didn't know yoga, but listen to this. She experienced the spiritual dynamics. Here's what she said. I know when my Lord is coming to me. I feel like a bullet is being shot up my spine. Then I feel like the top of my head is coming off. And then I see him. To a yogi, it's very clear. Her kundalini, spiritual energy, stirred at the base of her spine, went up her spine powerfully. It felt powerful because her nerves were not that used to this powerful energy. Like a bullet's being shot up my spine. Then I feel like pressure here. I feel like the top of my head is coming off. And then I see him. Spiritual dynamics. What we in yoga call the rising of the kundalini or the awakening. So her kundalini rose, penetrated the crown chakra, and she entered into spiritual awareness. We've been inspired by awakened Sufis who practice wonderful understanding of life. I just love the Rumi, the writings of Rumi. Study those and maybe the top of your head will come off too. It's easy when you study the wonderful workings, the wonderful writings, the wonderful life of Rumi. It didn't end well due to jealousy, but he was one who experienced God every day. So he went to God, from God to God. Zen koans from awakened Zen masters inspire us. It's fun to just spend a day or a week on different koans from Zen. Short, pithy sentences that help us nudge our mind Godward into spiritual awareness. As I say, today we're working on the awakening experiences and sayings of Christians. After they experience Spirit, they say beautiful awakeners. They have beautiful verses or writings which can help us have that experience too. So we're going to call these things that they say awakeners. Also, I should add the word saint. We call them saints. Saint is a Christian term meaning a holy person. And yogis use the word saint to mean someone who is spiritually awakened. So you can be martyred and called a saint, but we're referring in yoga, when we say saint, that person was spiritually awakened and lived a life based on that awakening. That's a saint. Yogananda used to call, from all the different saints, he used to say, our kind of saints. He meant those who were awakened, not just those who were martyred or somehow ended up in this 4-volume book. I've got 4 volumes of saints and their deeds, and often they were martyred. You know, they stood up bravely for what they believed, and they got classified as saints. Sometimes it was a battalion that were all slaughtered. But when we say saint, we mean, as Yogananda said, our kind of saints. We mean spiritually awakened. All right. I belonged to a church which called us saints. At the time, I had serious doubts that God even existed. And we were told we were saints. In yoga, when we apply the term, we mean an enlightened person, but we honor all good and dedicated men and women who are on the path. We just use the word saint to mean awakened, enlightened. Okay? Today we open our minds and hearts to the lives and words and experiences of our kinds of saints. And I threw in one televangelist who is quite saintly. So that'll keep you interested. What televangelist might this be? We'll hear a little about each saint and then reflect on a few of their realizations. And we're going to consider their realizations as awakeners for us. As we listen and ponder and meditate, we take their awakener into our minds and allow what they say to help our experience, our transcendence. Oh, the first one is a natural, he's just so profound. Meister Eckhart, 1260 to 1328. Born in Hockheim, a village in what is now called Germany. He was a Catholic theologian and mystic. He taught Dominican theology in Paris, Saxony, the Netherlands, and Bohemia. The Pope condemned some of his teachings in 1329 after he died, but nothing much happened, and his writings were highly influential for the next 2 centuries. Meister Eckhart. Oh, just buy his book and you'll be happy for months and months, years and years. So here are some of his awakeners, things he said that I am considering to be awakeners. Don't flee the world, but flee your outer self. Flee from selfishness to self-will. Otherwise, you will have no peace. Don't flee the world, flee your outer self. Flee from selfishness and self-will. Flee. Otherwise, you will have no peace. That's an awakener. Flee. Next one. Everything in us that is truly real is God's eternal being. But not in God's entire fullness. It's part of God. Everything in us that is truly real is God's eternal being. If God withdraws his being from creatures, creatures will disappear, including from you. If God withdraws his being from creatures, creatures will disappear. His main exhortation, turn to God in order that the essential principle implanted in you may be truly realized. Turn inward to God and be led by him. Turn to God in order that the essential principle implanted in you may be truly realized. Turn inward to God and be led by him. We could go on all day, but let's turn to another great awakened person. Emanuel Swedenborg, born in 1688, Swedish son of a professor of philosophy at Uppsala, who was also a Protestant bishop. Swedenborg, the man we're talking about, a scientist with the Swedish Board of Mines. He was considered the father of crystallography. In 1743, he became conscious of angels guiding him. In 1747, he resigned his role in science to study the scriptures, and he wrote many books, such as Divine Love and Wisdom, in 1763. He died in London, March 1772. Here are some of his sayings, which we call awakeners. As often as I said the Lord's Prayer morning and evening, I was raised to an interior sphere. But when the prayer was finished, I came again into my ordinary sphere. That's so about the rising of the Kundalini, the spiritual energy within one, and then the descent. A person can understand nothing else than that which God permits and in mercy grants. It's through God we understand. Through God we awaken. A person can understand nothing else than that which God permits and in mercy grants. Ready for another awakener? There is a spirit in every person, and every person, in respect to life, is a spirit, and the body only serves people to live on the earth. Bone and flesh in no way live and think. There is a spirit in every person, and every person, in respect to life, is a spirit. The body only serves people to live on the earth. There were these people, these spiritually awakened people, through time. Julian, often called Juliana, but Julian of Norwich, 1342 to 1416. An English Christian mystic and theologian, Julian wrote the first book in English known to be written by a woman, Revelations of Divine Love. She wrote that around 1395. Norwich at that time was the second largest city in England. Plagues were rampant during her lifetime. When she was 30, she became so ill she was given her last rites. She gazed at the crucifix for several hours, and during these hours, she had 16 visions of Jesus Christ and recovered on May 13th, 1373. Julian believed sin is necessary. What? Sin is necessary because it brings people to self-knowledge, which brings people to God in their lives. She was optimistic and said, God is all benevolent, omnibenevolent, she said, omnibenevolent. Her awakeners follow. We can live in the certainty of being loved by God and being protected by His providence. We can live in the certainty of being loved by God and being protected by His providence. Providence means provision for the future, prudence. I hope you're taking each of these, assimilating them. Another one, divine love is like motherly love. What? Divine love is like motherly love. God is both our mother and father. Christ's love is like a mother's love. I see no wrath except on humankind's side. God forgives that in us. For wrath is nothing else but a perversity and opposition to peace and love. God sees us as perfect and waits for the day when human souls mature, so that evil and sin will no longer hinder us. You want that again. God sees us as perfect and waits for the day when human souls mature, so that evil and sin will no longer hinder us. I think you'll enjoy this. Well, I'm sure you've been enjoying all of these, but Emily Dickinson, it's quite interesting to see what she said and how spiritual she was. She lived 1830 to 1886. She lived as a poet, recluse, and single lady in Amherst, Massachusetts. She was completely dominated by her congressman father. She began writing in 1861, but only 2 of her poems were published during her lifetime. Isn't that amazing? Only 2 of her poems were published during her lifetime. She died in 1886 and became recognized as one of America's greatest poets. So here is her poem, somewhat paraphrased, and it's a great awakener. It's just get into the mood of this. Going to heaven, I don't know when. Pray do not ask me how. Indeed, I'm too astonished, and yet it will be done, as sure as flocks go home at night. Going to heaven, I don't know when. Next, I shall know why when time is over, and I have ceased to wonder why. Christ will explain each separate anguish in the fair schoolroom of the sky. It's music, isn't it? I shall know why when time is over, and I have ceased to wonder why. Christ will explain each separate anguish in the fair schoolroom of the sky. And I shall forget the drop of anguish that scalds me now, that scalds me now. I'll forget it. Take all away from me, but leave me ecstasy. So she got to ecstasy in her life. How wonderful. Take all away from me, but leave me ecstasy, and I am richer then than all my fellow men. In ecstasy, I am richer than all my fellow men. Let's go on. Is it becoming me to dwell so wealthily, when at my very door are these possessing more in abject poverty? Some people in poverty at my door, but they have faith, or they have experience of God. They possess more in their poverty than I have. Oh, we could stay with each of these. Wouldn't it be wonderful to meet them? Next one, St. Catherine of Siena, 1347 to 1380. Born in Black Death-ravaged Siena, Italy. And she had a twin sister named Giovanna. How about this? St. Catherine's mother had 25 children, but half died. Catherine's family lived down the hill from the church and the cloister of the Dominican Catholic Church. She was devoted to God as a child. When she was 15, she refused to marry. She was 18 when she was allowed to wear the Dominican habit, but she joined a special order called the Mantellate, which was mainly for widows. These women in the Mantellate lived in their own homes, serving the poor and the sick, and near the church. After 3 years of solitude and silence, when she was 21, Catherine gave herself to serving the poor and the sick with her sisters of the Mantellate. She scarcely ate or slept. She had many mystical experiences. She represented the Pope, trying to reconcile the Pope with his city-states who were feuding with him, sometimes to the point of bloodshed. And she did get peace between the Pope and the state of Florence. She urged the Pope to leave Avignon in France. There was a time when the center of the church was in Avignon. I have visited there. It was a beautiful structure. She urged the Pope to leave Avignon in France and relocate the headquarters back in Rome. In these efforts, she was nearly assassinated. In 1380, she turned to a life of prayer and meditation and had numerous visions. She died April 29th, 1380, at the age of 33. But she had a fascinating and influential life. I've indicated here she had the bubonic plague. She went through ongoing wars. The church was falling apart. Here are a few of her sentences, her awakeners. Power of the Eternal Father, help me. Wisdom of the Son, S-O-N, enlighten the eye of my understanding. Tender mercy of the Holy Spirit, inflame my heart and unite it to yourself. We bear God's image. And then she wrote this famous letter. St. Catherine's letter to Charles V, the King of France. Your Majesty. So you'll find, felt a considerable authority in her closeness to God. Here we go. She says, Your Majesty, there are 3 specific things I am asking you. 1, the first is to make light of the world and of yourself and of all earthly pleasures. Hold your kingdom as something lent to you, not as if it were your own. She's telling the king this. 2, uphold true holy justice. Let it not be adulterated by selfish love for yourself or by flattery or by human respect. And don't pretend not to see if your officials are inflicting injustice. 3, Follow the teaching given you by this Master on the cross, which is exactly what my soul most longs to see in you. Friendship and love between you and your neighbor with whom you have been so long at war. How'd you like to receive that letter? Here's another awakener. A loving God awaits you in the glorious life beyond human comprehension. St. Catherine was an individual, surely, but her individuality was not self-seeking or self-serving. Her individuality is the expression of who she could be because of the God life within her. She had no personal agenda other than that which she perceived to be God's agenda: healing, reconciling, unifying, reestablishing the order that God had put in place at the dawn of creation. Now, while searching, we could quit anytime, right? But it goes on. There are these awakened people. And I don't know what you think of W.H. Auden, the great poet. I was blessed to hear him. I was visiting Yale and Yale University. And one afternoon, he came and read his poems to us, especially what he was working on recently. What a privilege. But I found him in a book of Protestant mystics. So I think I would have him qualify here because of what he is saying at the high level from which he is speaking his poetry. For the sixth of our kind of saints, I choose W.H. Auden. He wrote the introduction to one of my favorite books, The Protestant Mystics. He wrote, "The mystical experience is always given if it cannot," pardon me, I'll back up. One of my favorite things to say. The mystical experience is always given. It cannot be induced by an effort of will. Bear that in mind. It's always given to you when the time is right. Cannot be induced by an effort of will. Auden goes on, the experience seems more important than anything one experiences in the normal state. The mystical experience, the awakening, seems more important than anything one experiences in the normal human state, and is also a revelation of reality. For example, for a moment a veil was lifted, and I saw what really is. A veil was lifted, and I saw what really is. If it is true that Auden was a homosexual, hopefully it's an encouragement that homosexuals can be saints. In fact, scholars think that Apostle Paul was probably homosexual. But I'm not a scholar in this matter. I've just read what other scholars say. Also, Leonardo da Vinci was recognized as a gay mystic knower. And as far as I have heard, he was the most intelligent person. He had the greatest intelligence of any known human being through time, through history. Walt Whitman, too. Oh, I loved being with Mr. Auden. It was a true pleasure. On to number 7, William Wordsworth, born in 1770 in Cumberland, England, was England's poet laureate, so he was recognized. Educated at Cambridge, close friend of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He died in 1850. Here are some of Wordsworth's awakeners. This sounds just like a yogi wrote it. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony, an eye made quiet by the power of harmony, and the deep peace, and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. In this poise of power, In this deep joy, we see into the life of things. So I'll say it again. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. Next one. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. A sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns. A sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns. In his recollections of early childhood, there was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled, clothed in celestial light. When he was a kid, he saw that. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. Turning now to our TV evangelist, whom I enjoy watching regularly, Joel Osteen. He said, everything you see through your eyes is subject to change. That's what Buddha said. Everything you see through your eyes is subject to change. In spirit, listen to God and truth. Listen to God and truth. Not through your eyes. In spirit, listen to God and truth. Proclaim God's truth. Thank God and live in faith. Thank God and live in faith even well before the manifestation that you are seeking. Thank God and live in faith even well before the manifestation occurs. My friend, I hope you enjoy these awakenings which function as awakeners from some very great Christians, Catholic and Protestant, past mainly, but also present. Do you see that in yoga we're talking about awakening? And this awakening is very similar in many different paths, religions, sects. Spiritual energy rises, reveals the divine, and then a descent, bringing this awareness down into our daily lives. May you also be blessed with spiritual awakening.